All right, so let's take a look at part 2 of chapter 1.4, where we're going to be looking at conditional formatting. And what we can do with conditional formatting is change how our items appear. So for example, I'm looking at all these grades. All of these students have passed, so maybe I want to give that like a green background to say like, hey, you're doing great. These are some failing ones. I want to highlight those for a visual and say, oh, those aren't so great, so they should be red. And you can change these different values however you want. Now, going through it all and having to change each individual one sounds kind of annoying. So luckily in spreadsheets, we actually have a tool put into motion. So what we want to do is go into Format and go to Conditional Formatting. This will allow us to format the data based on whatever rules we want to put in. So we're looking at the first thing. They have single color and color scale. So you can do a lot of fun things with this. But I'm going to look at a single color. All right. And I'm going to choose my new range. I can click this little box here to kind of draw the box on all of this data that I want. Or I can even just type it in and add additional ranges as well. But when I click OK, now all of these boxes are being activated for conditional formatting. Now we can look at the format rules, format cells if, and we have all these different kind of ideas, very similar to how we were able to filter data as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for greater than or equal to, and it's going to say, well, what's the value you want it to be greater than or equal to? How about 65? Because then every grade that's 65 or higher is passing, and we can choose a nice background color. I'm going to choose this light green and click Done. And when I click out of that, we can see that all the grades where the students have passed are showing up as green. Now, we could also decide that we want to add another rule. And I'm just going to highlight this box before I add the rule. You don't have to do this, but if I click that, it automatically assumes that whole chunk of stuff. All right. If I didn't do that and I didn't have it selected, let me just undo that process. I could go to Format again, Conditional Formatting, and I can choose that range again. I'm going to choose that entire box of stuff, click OK, and now I want to format if they are less than 65. So that way any student who happens to be failing will get a red background. When I click Done, I can see that I kind of have like this visual spreading chart of exactly which students or which quiz grades are passing and which ones are not. And I can add these rules for just about anything that I want, and you can do some pretty neat stuff for that. All right. You can also do it based on a color scale, so you can actually choose how these grades work. All right. You can choose minimum values, different numbers, things like that. And so I can choose a minimum value. Let's make that a 0. Click a number, make it 0. To another number, make it 100. And now, when we look at this different type of formatting, I'm going to make this more of the green side, and click Done. All right, I'm going to delete my old one. Now we can even see on a scale from red to green on how students are doing. This is a little bit more confusing. This is not something that I would expect you to be able to perfectly apply, but you can kind of see how this idea holds when we're trying to go from really good grades. And then as the grades start to decrease, you notice that the green starts to fade a little bit out of it. So as we get into the 80s or even the 70s or even the 60s, we start to hit this like white non-colored area where that's kind of like a danger zone. And then as the grades get lower, they can also get more and more red. There's so many different options that we can choose for this. We can use green to yellow to red. We can kind of use that as a flow chart to explain. All right. And even with the midterm, we can see that a midterm grade, I can change that to a 65, and you can see how the grades start to fade towards the levels of performance. A lot of different stuff we can do to play around with this, but it's kind of neat just knowing that we can play around and just put in any type of rule that we want, and it will give us the automatic kind of like tracing or filling in of information as we need. So it's definitely something to look at on here, and it's definitely something to play around with. But with the conditional formatting, we can change everything based on specific rules. And I'm not expecting you to be perfect at this. I'm not expecting you to even understand the ins and outs on exactly how this works. But I am expecting you to be able to play around with it until you get results that you like or that you're happy with, and then you can use that to kind of nudge or change appearances based on your skill level. And as you get better and more experienced with it, you become more talented with this. Remember, no type of employer is expecting someone in an entry-level position to be able to perfectly and flawlessly execute tasks. They want you to be able to learn, they want to work with you, and they want to invest in you as an employee to see your skills grow and flourish over your course of employment. So again, remember, all of the stuff is just base exposure. We're learning the basics, we're learning how to do a couple neat things, and we're learning how to solve a few problems. And being able to solve problems is what this entire course is going to be about. All right. So the last thing that we have to look at in this chapter is how to create charts, like a pie chart, a bar chart, flow charts, line graphs, everything else like that. And we'll be exploring just how to play around with them and just adjust them so that we have nice visuals that we can play around with.